Oh, good afternoon, everyone. Day 2 in the afternoon. We're going to continue looking at our satipatthana practice this afternoon. So far, we've been looking at the first foundation of mindfulness, that is, kaya nupassana, or contemplation of the body. This afternoon we're going to start to look at the second foundation of mindfulness, Vedana, or Vedana nupassana, contemplation of feeling. Feeling plays a very important role in the Buddha's teaching. Not only is it isolated to become one of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, it is its own foundation. It's also one of the 5 aggregates separated from the other mental aggregates of perception and volitional formations and consciousness. Feeling also plays a very prominent role in the paticca samuppada, or the dependent origination, the formula in which the Buddha describes the arising of dukkha and the ceasing of dukkha. So clearly the Buddha allocated feeling a very important role in his teaching, and it's important for us to understand it, not only theoretically but also practically in our meditation practice, where it really counts. Coming to understand feeling will go a long way to alleviating much dukkha in your life. Feeling, or Vedana, is in fact the direct and proximate cause of craving. Craving, of course, is the cause of dukkha. What is feeling, or Vedana? Vedana is simply the affective tone of an experience, simply the flavor of an experience, the hue of an experience, if you like. It's just what it feels like. Is it pleasant? Is it unpleasant? Or is it neutral? It's something before an emotional state arises. It's just pleasantness. It's not liking or disliking, not wanting or not wanting, just the feeling, the pleasant feeling, the unpleasant feeling, and the neither pleasant nor unpleasant feeling, or the neutral feeling. It's just the flavor of a particular experience in the present moment. Feeling arises in every moment. Structurally, feeling must arise with the 5 aggregates as they arise and pass away. It means that each moment of this mind and body process is joined with a particular type of feeling, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. All feelings are impermanent, conditioned, dependently arisen. The Buddha tells us they are subject to destruction, to vanishing, to fading away, and ceasing. There's no such thing as a permanent feeling. All feelings arise and pass away. There are 6 types of feeling. There's feeling which is born from eye contact, feeling that is born from ear contact, feeling born from nose contact, feeling born of tongue contact, body contact, feeling born of mind contact. 6 types of feeling, 3 different flavors, pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. On the occasion that one particular type of feeling is arising, pleasantness is arising, for example, one does not feel painful feeling or neutral feeling. One feels only pleasant feeling. That means that feeling is mutually exclusive. There's no mixture. It's either one feeling or the other type of feeling. And they arise and pass away quite rapidly. Feeling is conditioned by contact at the 6 sense bases. We'll have a look at that in a moment. The wanderer Potaliputta. In the Buddha's time, there was a wanderer who came to visit the Buddha quite a number of times. His interactions and conversations with the Buddha are recorded in the Pali texts. He came to ask the Buddha once, "How does feeling arise, Venerable Sir?" The Buddha replied, "Friend, having done an intentional action through body, speech, or mind that is to be felt as pleasant, one feels pleasure. Having done an intentional action through body, speech, and mind that is to be felt as unpleasurable or painful, one feels pain. Having done an intentional action through body, speech, and mind which is to be felt as neutral, one feels a neutral feeling." So evidently, feeling is conditioned. Feeling is a product of intentions. In fact, our present moment experience is a conditioned one, in which feeling is the resultant, being carried on from previous intentions. The important thing for us is that feeling must not be personified. Feeling must not be appropriated. It must not be identified with, but we must understand it. We meditate to try and understand feeling, not to get rid of it. This is very important to understand. Because we're used to shying away from unpleasant situations or present moment experiences which are joined with unpleasant feeling, we generally reject the unpleasant, find a way to get rid of it, find a way to remove it or push it away. We react to unpleasant feeling in our search for pleasantness. Likewise, when a pleasant feeling arises, we generally welcome it, we enjoy it, we want it to remain, we try to keep it for as long as we can. Of course, when it passes away, as it naturally should, we generally get a little bit upset, a little bit sad. Oh, the pleasant feeling is gone. Our life is completely dominated by pleasant and unpleasant feelings. Although they probably only make up about 1% each, 98% of our life is neutral feeling. There's some feeling there, but it's maybe not so unpleasant and it's not so pleasant. We just cruise along through the neutral feeling. A little bit of unpleasantness, we react by trying to push it away. A little bit of pleasantness, we react by chasing and holding, trying to keep it. And we go through life doing this day after day, not really understanding what it is that we're chasing this pleasantness, trying to get away from the unpleasantness. If we don't understand feeling and the sense perception process around feeling, our default setting, with ignorance included, is one which leads to sakkaya ditthi, or personality view. The mind and body process, or these 5 aggregates, become conditioned by subjectivity. Craving sneaks into them in that moment if we don't note and know efficiently. Sakkaya ditthi arises, personality view or individuality view. The Buddha's teaching is all about trying to block this from happening, using wisdom to uncover the moment so that we can break through this very tight and stable conditioning process that gives rise to identity view and gives rise to dukkha. Now, bhikkhus, this is the way that leads to the origination of identity view. One regards the I, the visible objects, the consciousness that arises with contact, and the feeling that is born from that contact. One regards them as, this is mine, this I am, this is myself. The same with the ear door. One regards the ear, sounds, ear consciousness that arises, or hearing that arises, the contact that brings those three together, the feeling born of that contact, ear contact. One regards them as, this is mine, this I am, this is myself, and so on with the other sense bases. The Buddha also takes the opposite of this. He says, monks, this is the way that leads to the cessation of identity view. This is the way that leads to the end of personality, to the end of a sense of self. One does not regard the I, visible objects, and the consciousness that arises in that moment, the contact and the feeling born of that experience. One does not regard them as, this is mine, this I am, this is myself. This is the way that personality view comes to cease in the present moment. If we're able to do it continuously enough, when we're watching the sense bases. Phassa. Phassa is contact. Phassa is a Pali word. It's the cause and condition for the arising of feeling. The Buddha repeatedly reminds us that we need to understand feelings. We need to see feelings as impermanent, dukkha, and non-self. He says, what is impermanent, that is dukkha. What is dukkha, that is non-self. Now in the dependent origination, which is printed on the back of your chanting sheets there, you'll see in the link between the 6 sense bases and feeling is a link called phassa, or contact. This is the point where the Buddha identified where defilement enters into the process of our sense perception. Phassa is another word for now. Phassa is the point of contact where consciousness arises at the 6 sense bases. Because just as from contact and friction of 2 fire sticks, heat is generated and fire is produced, and with the separation and disjunction of those 2 fire sticks, the corresponding heat ceases and subsides. So too, dependent upon contact to be felt as pleasant, there arises pleasant feeling. When one feels a pleasant feeling, one understands, I feel a pleasant feeling. And on a later occasion, with the cessation of that contact to be felt as pleasant, the corresponding feeling ceases and subsides. The feeling is impermanent. It arises when the sense bases are triggered by contact in the present moment. Our job as meditators is to focus in on this point of contact, this present moment experience in the sense perception process, not allowing the mind to run into the past or the future, but to see that point where consciousness is actually arising at the sense bases. There's a wonderful description of this in the Madhupindika Sutta, the honey bowl sutta. The Buddha says, dependent upon eyes and forms, eye consciousness arises. The meeting of the 3 is contact. With contact as condition, feeling. So far, that's fine. The sense perception process hasn't been infiltrated yet. It's still natural. It hasn't been subjectified. The description, however, goes on, and the grammar in the passage changes. It goes from being a neutral objective statement into a subjectified one. Dependent upon eyes and form, eye consciousness arises. The meeting of the three is contact, with contact as condition, feeling. What one feels, that one perceives. What one perceives, that one thinks about. What one thinks about, that one mentally proliferates. So at this point of feeling, if contact is not known, if the point where consciousness is arising at the sense basis, if that is not clearly known with awareness and wisdom in the present moment, the feeling that arises dependent upon that contact becomes subjectified. What one feels, that one perceives. What one perceives, that one thinks about. What one thinks about, that one mentally proliferates. And so the story starts to be created. We feel, we perceive, we think, and we mentally proliferate. Mental proliferation means we go into subjectivity. We start to take things as being, this is me, this is mine, this I am, and this is a self. With what one has mentally proliferated as the source, perceptions and notions tinged by mental proliferation beset a man with respect to past, future and present forms cognizable through the eye. And so on with the other sense bases. When there is a nose and an odor, nose consciousness arises or smelling arises. The meeting of these three unique elements, the sensitive matter in the nose, an odor externally, and consciousness is present. When these three meet together, that's contact. That's the present. Feeling arises based upon that. With contact as conditioned feeling. What one feels, that one perceives. What one perceives, that one thinks about. What one thinks about, that one mentally proliferates. So it's important in our meditation practice that we understand what's going on in this mind and body process, to understand where this sense of self is coming from. It's an illusion. It arises simply by taking the sense bases or the consciousness, contact itself, and the feeling born of that contact as being mine, as happening to me, as happening for me. If we take them personally, we've entered into dukkha, the first noble truth. There is dukkha, and apparently there is. It's arising continuously at all 6 sense bases that we have. If we're unmindful, that is. If we're floating through life, allowing the mind to be unregulated and unchecked, without establishing our awareness and presence in the moment, without using wisdom to create space around these various objects, we will be stuck to them. Subjectivity will sneak in. A little parasite will get into the sense perception process and spoil it. Craving is like a virus, craving for being. It's always on the lookout at the point of contact. Craving wants to get in and create a sense of me and mine and I. Why? It delights in it. Delight. Feeling is the condition and cause for craving. It's because of delight and lust for being that we come to be. We want to be. You can feel it in yourselves. We crave to be something. We crave to be somebody. We want to be something. Most of our life is spent going through trying to become somebody or collect things for myself. We don't want to be nothing. That's unimaginable hell. If somebody says to you, oh, you're just nothing, how hurtful is it? Why is it hurtful? Think about that. Somebody comes to me and says, oh, you're just nothing. I smile and say, oh, great, the practice is working. just a nothing. No. If you want to attain enlightenment, if you want to awaken, you have to let go of this idea that you are somebody. That's how we awaken to the present moment and to the truth. Otherwise, we're in the sea of subjectivity, just a mass of aggregates that have been subjectified. Pancha upadana khandha, the 5 aggregates affected by clinging. You'll have to decide how far and how fast you want to travel along this path of subjectivity removal, personality view removal. Some of you who have invested a great deal of time and effort into creating a funky personality. You've educated it, you've got a title, you have a business card to prove what you are, how you are. Maybe you have a bunch of fancy material objects which help to identify you, to establish yourself. The Buddha's teaching is going against that stream. It may not be a stream which is particularly enticing, especially after you've invested so much time to become who you are. But do you want to continue living in delusion, or do you want to be free? Have a look at how heavy this personality actually is. You have to keep enhancing it. You have to keep up the image of it. It's continuous. It's a heavy investment and a great burden. The 6 sense bases of contact are impermanent and subject to change. If anybody was to say that the pleasant feeling or unpleasant feeling that arises from something that's impermanent is permanent, they would not be speaking accurately. Pleasant feeling ceases because its conditions cease. The sense of self, if we were to hold that feeling was permanent, the sense of self would become permanent. But feeling is not permanent. And this subjectivity is also not permanent. It arises moment to moment. It does have little gaps in it if you're mindful in the present moment. You can break this fast flowing stream of subjectivity. You need to note and know rapidly. Try to catch up, try to keep up with the moment. Try to keep up with the contact at the 6 sense bases where consciousness is arising. Consciousness is just the knowing. It's just the faculty or the ability to know things. It knows smells, it knows tastes, it knows sights and sounds. It also knows ideas and physical sensations. In the Brahmajala Sutta, it's the first discourse in the long collection of discourses given by the Buddha in the Digha Nikaya. The Brahmajala Sutta, Brahma is the highest. That's a synonym for something high and great. Jala is a net. The Buddha gave the Brahmajala Sutta to show how that the sense of self is completely conditioned by contact and feeling. In fact, he gave this discourse to prove that the 62 different types of views in which the sense of self can be established can all be caught in a huge net. He actually threw a net out over the 62 different types of views. He gives us this. We won't go into all the different ways in which people can imagine or posit a sense of self. But he says, when those ascetics and Brahmins, Samanas and Brahmanas, who are speculators about the self in the past, who are speculators about the self in the future, having fixed views about the self, when they put forward views about the self in 62 ways, that is merely the feeling of those who do not know and do not see. The delight, worry, and facilitation of those immersed in craving. With regard to all these speculators about the self in the past, about the self in the future, who put forward self-views in 62 ways, that is conditioned by contact. That all these speculators should experience feeling without contact, that is impossible. They experience these feelings by repeated contact through the 6 sense bases. With contact as condition, feeling arises. What the Buddha is telling us here is that it doesn't matter how you try to invent or posit or create a sense of subjectivity or a sense of self. Whatever and however that delusion arises, it's all conditioned by contact and the feeling born of contact. It all leads to craving. It all ends up in dukkha. The Buddha's teaching is designed for us to break through this process that's occurring moment after moment. It occurs for everybody in the same way. We're all conditioned beings, we're sense sphere creatures. We're beings that are born into a sense sphere. The sense sphere means we have 6 sense doors, with the body made up of fairly gross material matter. Earth, water, fire, air. We're all beings in this same situation. Contact is occurring in the same way and feeling is occurring in the same way. It's because of delusion, because of ignorance, and because we allow craving to infiltrate the present moment experience that a sense of self arises. This sense of self is the direct cause of any worries and concerns. It's the direct cause of any depression or any anxiety, worries, and any other unpleasant or pleasant experiences we may have. The Buddha gives us an instruction on how to get out of this great big net of self-views. He says, when monks understand, as they really are, the arising and passing away of the 6 sense bases of contact, when you understand the satisfaction, the danger, and the escape from them, he knows that which goes beyond all these views of self. I'll repeat that. When a bhikkhu understands as they really are, the arising and passing away of the 6 bases of contact, the satisfaction, the danger, and the escape from them, he knows that which goes beyond all those views of self. So, the Buddha's asking us to understand these feelings as they're arising in 5 ways. He asks us to understand their arising, how they arise, the sense perception process, how they cease. He asks us to understand the satisfaction that feeling can give us. Of course, there's pleasantness in life. The Buddha doesn't deny that. Pleasant feeling is arising all the time. If you have very good karma, if you've done some good intentions in the past, then you will be. If you've inclined your mind towards wholesome intentions, there's a whole vast array of pleasantness that's awaiting to arise at your 6 sense bases. We have to understand the satisfaction of this pleasantness. We have to understand how the mind and body process delights in pleasantness. We have to understand the satisfaction that's going on. Fourthly, the Buddha asks us to understand the danger of this feeling. He asks us to see clearly. Look at the problem that it's creating if it's not noted and known. If we don't see it clearly, look what happens. We understand the arising, the passing, the satisfaction that is entailed in the experience. We understand the danger of that particular feeling. When we do that, we understand the escape from it. We understand the bliss, the freedom from feeling. And we come to understand with that which lies beyond all these views of self. We understand that experience, we experience that experience of what lies beyond the sense of self, what lies beyond subjectivity. In other words, we understand nature. We come back to truth. We come back to what the Buddha calls Dhamma. We see the Dhamma. We see the experience of the five aggregates which have not been infected by subjectivity, which has not been infected by a sense of self. This is the purpose for which we're practicing our meditation. This is why we're trying to bring ourselves into the present moment continuously, while we're trying to internalize our awareness as much as possible, while we're noting at the six sense bases. Primarily we're using the body door at the moment, the body base, but we can also be aware of the eye, ear, nose, tongue bases, and of course the mind door as well. That's also producing its own stuff. Then the Buddha says that one shall here and now make an end of suffering without abandoning the underlying tendency to lust for pleasant feeling, without abolishing the underlying tendency to aversion for painful feeling, without removing the underlying tendency to ignorance with regard to neither painful nor pleasant feeling, without abandoning ignorance and arousing true knowledge. This is impossible. We need to let go the underlying tendency for lust based on a pleasant feeling. We need to let go the underlying tendency, or remove, banish the underlying tendency of aversion for unpleasant feeling. Happens so quickly, doesn't it? A little bit of pleasantness, straight on it. I'll have that. A little bit of unpleasantness, no way, push it away. Get rid of it. Underlying tendencies of the mind. Habitual reaction patterns, if you like. We react with lust and delight towards the pleasant, and we react with aversion and disliking towards the unpleasant. When there's neutral feeling arising, we're deluded and ignorant. We don't grasp that either. When we're reacting in this way with states of lust or delight, states of aversion or hate, we're creating fresh karma, unwholesome states, which can lead also, again, to further unpleasant feeling arising. When one is touched by a pleasant feeling, if one delights in it, welcomes it, and remains holding on to it, then the underlying tendency of lust lies within one. This is to be removed. When one is touched by a painful feeling, if one sorrows and grieves and laments, weeps, beating his breast and becoming distraught, then the underlying tendency to aversion still lies within one. When one is touched by neither a painful nor pleasant feeling, if one doesn't understand as it actually is, the arising, the passing away, the satisfaction, the danger and the escape in regard to that neutral feeling, then the underlying tendency to ignorance lies within one. So our practice is to be supremely aware at the point of contact where this feeling is arising. We need to ensure that we take all feelings as, this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. We need to ensure that feeling is not personified or personalized, or we don't take it personally. As soon as we take it, dukkha is arising. Craving finds a little opening. Oh, here's an unmindful moment. I'll get in there and create a sense of self. And so the matrix rolls on, moment after moment, creating a very nice little story for itself. That story is called my life. This is what I'm doing with my life. The thing is like Frankenstein. It's cooked up and becomes a personality. A person is created. It believes it is someone. That's all that's happening. Impermanent, dependently arisen and conditioned mind and matter that's arising and passing away very rapidly. Because ignorance and craving are around, this process believes it is someone. This thing believes it's Anthony. It's come to that conclusion. Yours also believe that you are somebody. But this is ignorance. This is not seeing things clearly as they really are. When our Vipassana practice becomes strong, when we're able to sustain and maintain our awareness in the present moment, diligently noting whatever is arising and passing away, awareness and wisdom effectively block ignorance and craving from entering into the present moment experience. That point of contact, that phassa, does not yield a self, does not give rise to a self, does not produce any subjectivity. The experience is seen as it actually is. The arising, the passing, the satisfaction that could arise, the danger that may arise. And one sees clearly for oneself the escape from that pleasant feeling. You've dodged a bullet, but the bullets are coming very rapidly. They come repeatedly at you. Feeling is being fired at every single moment of contact. You will need to be supremely mindful in the present moment. You'll need to maintain a strong guard of awareness and wisdom, the noting what's there and the knowing, stepping back, creating space so the bullet can't touch you, the bullet of craving. When we can do this effectively in a very short period of time, there'll be a little break, a little glitch in the matrix. The film will shudder a little bit. There'll be a little bit of distortion, and then probably it will continue flowing on as it always has. But as our meditation practice develops, there'll be more and more glitches in the matrix. It'll start to shimmer. It'll start to shake. It won't be so strong. It won't be so enduring. This thought of me, mine, and I, this personality that is being generated continuously, will start to have gaps. Our practice is to be so continuous, so effective, that these gaps become bigger. They become more pronounced, more sustained, until we can actually experience longer periods where this craving is not infiltrating the present moment experience. When our samadhi is strong enough, we're able to sustain this ability to observe in this particular mode. Things are arising and passing away naturally, without being taken as me, mine, and I, without being taken as a sense of self. The point in our practice where this starts to happen is the stage of knowledge called udayavaya jnana, or the knowledge of arising and passing away. when we see very clearly mental and physical phenomena arising and passing away naturally, sense of self is executed. It doesn't arise, in fact. It ceases. The whole process of sense perception has gone to cessation. The third noble truth starts to operate. Ignorance is banished and true knowledge arises. Our awareness and wisdom is powerful enough to overcome this ignorance and craving, but you will need to practice diligently. You'll need to get up to speed as quickly as you can to overcome this. The Buddha called Udaya Vaya Jnana, or the knowledge of arising and passing away, he called it the deathless. He called it the amata dhatu. He afforded it with quite a fancy term, a dhatu, an element. Indeed, it is an element in the universe of elements. It's the deathless element. It's called the deathless element because there's no death arising in that moment. Death is a concept which relates to a person. People die. In that moment, however, there's no person there. There's no personality. Personhood has ceased. So death is something which simply doesn't apply. It's the deathless experience. It's the moment in space and time where a sense of self is removed from these five aggregates. Our job as meditators is to bring this experience up continuously, as often as we can, and still until wisdom can grow and mature, until wisdom can finally pull out the roots, the underlying tendencies, the greed, hatred and delusion that permeates our existence. When we talk about feelings, be sure not to confuse feeling with other states that may be arising. I want you to try and isolate feeling in your meditation practice. I want you to become aware and note feeling whenever it is arising, whenever it becomes apparent. As we've been saying, maintain your awareness on the main object, the anchor of our practice, rising, falling, sitting, rising, falling, sitting, rising, falling, sitting. Continue going around and around like that. If you happen to notice that there's any unpleasantness in your present moment experience, make a note. Unpleasant. Don't let it go through without being noticed. If there's any pleasantness that starts to arise, make a note. Pleasantness is arising. Unpleasantness and pleasantness lie at the root of almost all emotions and all thoughts. It's because of the pleasantness and unpleasantness that perception leads to thinking. And thinking leads to greater and greater conceptual proliferation. Our lives are a flow of conceptual proliferation. The Pali word is papancha. We're living in a stream of papancha because we do not know and do not see the point of contact where feeling arises. And if feeling is arising unnoted and unknown, with feeling as condition, craving comes to be. With craving as condition, clinging. With clinging as condition, being. With being as condition, birth. With birth as condition, old age, sickness and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief and despair. Thus is the arising of this whole mass of dukkha. Simply because we don't catch it. So you'll need to catch it often and regularly. I want you to make sure that you can differentiate or distinguish the difference between physical sensations and feeling. Physical sensation is just that, something physical, something itchy, something hard, something aching, something stinging, something burning, something light, something comfortable, something soft, something tranquil. These are physical sensations. They're quite different from pleasantness and unpleasantness. Although they are arising together and existing together and also passing away together, they are individual experiences. The same with emotional states. You can become sad and you can become happy. Mostly it's based upon feeling. But try to see the difference between an emotional state, a mind state which is full of greed or lust, a mind that is full of hate or aversion, a mind that's full of confusion and worry and doubt. Try to see the difference between those mental or mind states and the very basic feeling, the pleasantness and unpleasantness. Emotional states are, well, they're a compounded experience. They include feeling, they include physical sensation, and they include a lot of thinking. Feeling is just a single part of that whole experience. Try to isolate it within the field of rapidly manifesting self-view. Try to isolate the sense of feeling and just make a little note. When we're noting feeling, when we're noting and knowing feeling, we're trying not to get caught in it. We're trying not to subjectify it. We're allowing it to arise and pass away. Most importantly, all we're doing is simply trying to understand it in the present moment. We're trying to know that it's occurring right now. Please avoid trying to get rid of. We're not trying to get rid of feeling. Feeling is structurally in our experience moment after moment. You won't get rid of it. It's going to continue to arise again and again. Our job is just to understand it. It's through understanding that feeling is let go. So please don't try and push feeling away. That's another type of reaction. We're not trying to get rid of anything in our meditation practice. Everything that arises in this mind and body process is a suitable object on which we can practice Vipassana meditation. We're not trying to get rid of anything. We're actually trying to accept whatever is arising. We accept and acknowledge this is how it is in this particular moment. This is a dependently arisen and conditioned experience. We're trying to understand that experience. When we understand it, the mind naturally creates space around that experience, around that phenomena. Wisdom neutralizes that experience. When the experience is fully known, craving can't enter it. It then doesn't become a base for a sense of self. It becomes a base of freedom in the fast-flowing stream of samsara. So our job is to just continuously flip our experience, our subjective experience, into one which is purely nature, or an objective one. It's very hard and difficult for us to achieve this. It takes patience. It takes a lot of practice. Don't be upset if you keep getting caught by unpleasantness. States of aversion arise very quickly when you don't see the unpleasant. This type of meditation is not the type of meditation where we come to examine the content of our experience. We don't want to get into the hows and whys of this thing arising. If you get yourself into an unpleasant mind state, in an emotional state, you start reacting, you've been triggered by something, It's not the time for you to dwell and examine what this state is. We want to go back to a point where it's being conditioned. We want to understand what is conditioning this state that's arising. Many meditations or psychotherapies or different types of therapies try to deal with the state that's arising. The Buddha's teaching goes behind that to see the condition that's causing that experience. And the Buddha has isolated feeling as that which causes and conditions our experiences. So we need to understand clearly what this feeling is. We need to see the unpleasant as just the unpleasant. Don't reject it. Don't push it away. Don't allow aversion to arise towards unpleasantness. We've all done unwholesome intentions in the past. So unpleasantness is going to be part of the flow. It's part of the stream. That's part of being human. We're kind of in the mid-realm here. We experience both pleasantness and unpleasantness continuously, one after the other. Pleasant, 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 unpleasant, unpleasant, pleasant, pleasant, unpleasant, unpleasant, pleasant, unpleasant. If we're not noting and knowing, we just get pushed along. We just react. Oh, unpleasant, get rid of. Pleasant, yeah, more of that. And so we go through. This is the way that we navigate our way through samsara. Through seeking out pleasant experiences, it's the only way we know how to overcome unpleasantness. It's called sensual pleasure. We seek delight and joy from objects of the senses. We're going around searching for pleasantness through the eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body door. The Buddha says that there are these 5 chords of sensual pleasure. What are the 5? Forms cognizable by the eye that are wished for, desired, agreeable and likable, connected with sensual desire and provocative of lust. Sounds, smells, tastes and touches. Various physical sensations that are cognized through the body. That's what we're watching at the moment, the rise and fall. That are wished for, desirable and agreeable, likable, connected with sensual desire and provocative of lust. Now the pleasure and joy that arise dependent upon these 5 chords of sensual pleasure is called simply sensual pleasure. The Buddha calls it a filthy pleasure, a coarse pleasure, an ignoble pleasure. He says, of this kind of pleasure I say that it should not be pursued, that it should not be developed, that it should not be cultivated, that it should be feared. When we're stuck in chasing sensuality, when we get stuck in chasing the pleasantness, we're like galloping horses going along, trying to get that next pleasure, trying to get that next thing. We're stuck. It's our only escape. It has been up until now, for many of us, the only way for us to maneuver and navigate through the samsaric experience with any kind of joy in our lives. But the Buddha says that this is not the path that leads to the cessation of suffering. In fact, it's a path which continues the samsaric experience when we don't realize and acknowledge it. Controlling our reactions to these 3 different types of feelings through bare attention and observation is the path. It's the path for us to understand how feeling arises and how feeling passes away. I want you to see this happening for yourselves in your own experience. Listening to it is one thing, experiencing it is another. Try to see the little bit of satisfaction that arises in some feelings. Try to understand the danger of where delighting in that satisfaction will lead you. And try to let go. of the feeling. When you let go of the feeling, you'll see that which lies beyond the sense of self, which lies beyond sakkaya ditthi. The Buddha has given this point of contact in the present moment. He says it's the key. This is the key which unlocks our liberation. We need to be supremely mindful, attending, alert, aware, knowing in the present moment to see this process in operation. When we do, at that very point of contact, subjectivity fails to arise. When subjectivity fails to arise, we reach cessation of the sense of self. And this is the heart of mind training in the Buddha's discipline. So please try to be aware during the weeks here, as we're doing the practice. Try to be aware when you're getting triggered by unpleasantness or pleasantness. Sometimes the unpleasantness arises from an external object, a person, or some other external object. Sometimes the unpleasantness arises simply from our own thoughts, our own emotional states. Pleasantness can be joined through the physical doors, eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, or through the mental door, the mind door. There can be unpleasantness, there can be pleasantness. The correct procedure is to just note and know this feeling when it's arising. Note it, be still with it, acknowledge that it's there and allow it to fade away. If you don't hold it and personify it, then it passes away naturally and extremely quickly. Feeling only stays if you take it as being mine. If the craving is finding a sense of self in that feeling, it's very happy to stay in that feeling. As soon as it's seen, it falls away, and so does the sense of self. I think that's enough for you to understand that. We need to practice it though. That's the way.